Hey everyone, welcome to Music with Matt. Today I want to revisit the topic of the video I did with the most views so far. That would be the video about ECM Records, that amazing, iconic, wonderful record label that clearly many people really love the music that they've put out so far and are continuing to do quite regularly. I think this year is going to have another amazing roster of releases from ECM. I'm so excited to take a listen to those. But today we're going to take it way back to the very beginnings of that label. On that first video I did, a lot of you commented that I did not focus on releases from the early part of their catalog, kind of the beginnings of the record label. And a lot of you were surprised that I didn't touch on those, and some were disappointed. Well, there's a huge reason for why I didn't include some of those releases that people were mentioning, or just that era in general, is simply because of my age. I was not around, I was not alive yet when a lot of those titles, those famous titles from like Keith Jarrett and Pat Metheny came out. I didn't grow up on those. Now, sure, there's a lot of music I love right now that I also didn't grow up on, but it was introduced to me some way and it became a part of my musical library. ECM Records was somewhat of a recent, and I use that loosely, but it's a recent discovery for me. Really, I discovered the bulk of my ECM collection when I was in college, and so there were certain releases that I was looking up, like from Bach or Mozart pieces that were on ECM Records that I would buy because we were studying it in class. Maybe a certain ensemble class would require me to purchase a jazz album on ECM. So my library started with that, and then it went to the music that I really loved, and then I would start discovering stuff. But right now it's just like playing catch up with all the new stuff they release every year, because it's a huge amount of music they release every year. So there's still a lot, like right now, to process. And then there's over 1,000 releases in the past that I got to catch up with too. So slowly but surely. So today I'm going to try to remedy that. We're going to do a short video today. I apologize if I don't get your favorite release. But I'm going to go back to the beginning of the catalog of ECM and show 5 titles from that era that are certainly in my favorites, and albums that have had a huge impact on me. So hopefully that will appease some of you that were disappointed that I didn't hit the early titles. So let's take a look at what those are. So let's start the video with the very first ECM title I ever physically owned myself. It was on a CD. And this would be from the one you were all commenting, Keith Jarrett. Keith Jarrett, Gary Peacock, and Paul Motion live at the Deerhead Inn. This was the very first one I heard. I fell in love with it immediately. I loved the track selections on there, just a perfect introduction to the Keith Jarrett trio and the massive amount of albums that his trio did looking at jazz standards. It's very difficult to pick a favorite out of those. I'm not sure if I do have a favorite. I love them all, but this one certainly is maybe has a little bit of an edge on it because it was the very first one I ever owned and the very first one I ever discovered. So that we're going to start right off with that one, and now we've crossed Keith Jarrett off the list. A lot of you were asking where that was in my last video. So let's start with that. Let's go maybe from one jazz pianist to another jazz pianist. Chick Corea was a staple early on in the ECM catalog, then kind of disappeared for a while, then would come up here and there later in the years, but that beginning era with ECM, oh man, were there some incredible records, including my personal favorite out of all of those, the one with Miroslav Vitous and Roy Haynes. I mean, tell me, what can you get when you combine those 3 musicians? It's got to be great, right? You're taking 3 of the most masterful musicians ever and putting them together on one disc. Actually, 2. And then there was a live album too. It was so good. This album is so high energy. I think this is more high energy than if you would drink a case of energy drinks. And these 3 are just flying on this CD. It's so good. I really love it. It's a lot of free music, and then they go into my favorite, Meredith Monk. So this is just such a perfect record. I really love it. I've loved it since the second I heard it, and this one is in regular rotation for me as well. Up next, I'm going to do five total releases on this video, 3 of them from the regular series and then 2 from the new series. So the last one for the regular series is one of the coolest records ECM ever released, if you ask me. This is from Dave Holland and Barre Phillips. The title actually is something that I misread for many years, and it was only recently that I actually correctly read it, which is Music from 2 Basses. And somehow I always read it as Music for 2 Basses. I've seen a lot of albums, you know, music for blank instrument, and so I don't know, something in my mind just always put it as music for 2 basses. But music from, that's quite interesting. It's a subtle change, but it's like a big difference for me. As I'm thinking, like, you know, they're just going to go in there, and this CD or this album is just music from those basses. It's just, it really puts it in a whole new context. It's kind of hard to explain, but once you turn it on, you realize, wow, this really is music from 2 basses, and they are just absolutely going to town on this record. Oh, it is just incredible. Super intense. The intensity never dips below maximum. I mean, this is just incredible. If you have not heard this record yet, I absolutely strongly suggest you pause the video, go get that record, and make sure you're sitting down when you turn it on, because it will blast you away. It is really remarkable. This one might be a little controversial. I played it for a few people, and it was a little too high energy for them, but I love it. This is one of my favorites. And now for the new series. So I'm going to start with actually a series on new series that you will be able to guess even before I say it, just by the description. But it's a number of albums that did something that I think is frankly genius. I really love this idea of juxtaposing old work, familiar work perhaps, with something unfamiliar, something new, something that maybe audiences would not be so eager to dive into, maybe reluctant to, maybe they don't like it. And the purpose of these albums is to make a connection, somehow slowly introduce the listener to these new works in hopes that they will be more receptive to them, more appreciative of them. And I think that's really a brilliant goal, whether it be on ECM records or at a concert or just in general. I think, and I have seen it often work, but that didn't stop thousands of people from voicing very angry, negative reviews about the wonderful albums, in my opinion, that Thomas Demenga did, juxtaposing Bach cello suites with very modern new music, classical compositions. My favorite out of all of those is very hard to determine because I love them all, but one that's maybe the closest to me is the one with Elliott Carter. Elliott Carter has since I was a kid been one of my favorite composers, and this album pairs the third cello suite with pieces by Carter, and I had to learn the third cello suite for a class at Berkeley, so that one really is quite special. That CD, I mean, is quite special to me. And, you know, frankly, I don't understand the negative reviews. If you don't like the piece, then just, you know, skip the track, then whatever. But it's not a bad record just because you don't like the inclusion of a modern piece on there. And just quickly to say, these albums actually had the effect on me that they were supposed to, of introducing me to new works, but it was actually the other way around. Usually I would be getting these albums for the modern work, and I wasn't really interested in the Bach piece, but I would listen to it anyway, and the performance by Demenga, the recording, the mixing, the mastering was all so perfect that I fell in love with the music. And now I have all 6 cello suites. I love them all, and it's because I was introduced to them by buying a CD that had Haynes or Elliott Carter or Young on it. It's had music that I was more used to, and it introduced me to the music that I didn't know about so much. So if you are still on the fence about those number of albums, give it another try. I think they're really worth putting some serious thought into. It's a great idea, and I think a great result. All right, so the last album I'm going to talk about today is very early in ECM's history, and that is from Meredith Monk. This one's titled Do You Be. This album is just so good. I love it so much. I can distinctly remember sitting in my apartment in Boston. I think I was still a freshman in college, maybe sophomore at that point, and I was still discovering a lot of new music that I hadn't heard before, and I turned this album on for the very first time, and I think it was my first introduction to Meredith Monk, and I remember feeling what a powerful introduction this was to her music. All of her albums are really detailed, in-depth, amazing additions to her catalog of works. They all take you on a really deep journey, but this was my first experience with her, and it was just so profound and so strong. I mean, there was just so much energy and strength to her vocal work, to her compositions, just to the whole album in its entirety. But that was the first time I heard her vocal techniques. It was in a style I had never heard before, and it made me a fan of hers forever right then. I mean, and that record is still on heavy rotation for me. I really love it. I have seen in a couple online forums about ECM records that a lot of people don't know where to start with Monk's output. There's a lot of CDs, there's a lot of different styles within her own work. I say just start. Don't pick one and don't analyze it. Just put one in, sit down, clear your mind, and let it play from start to end. And it will take you on a really deep journey. And there's no wrong choices when it comes to her work on ECM. They're all super. So maybe you'll start with this one, maybe you won't, but I think you'll like all of them. So check it out. Well, thank you so much for watching this today, and thanks for watching my videos all along. I started this project towards the beginning of the pandemic as a way to just stay involved in music when shows were canceled, and because of you watching, you've inspired and encouraged me to keep going. It means a lot to me that I can share my thoughts and opinions about the music that I love, and the only goal I have with it is to share something that I really love in hopes that you'll love it too. And feel free to share it back. If you have an album that I don't know about that you really want me to, let me know about it, and I'll put it on the second you tell me about it. I really love hearing music for the first time. There's nothing like discovering something brand new. So really thank you so much for being on this Music with Matt journey with me since the beginning of the pandemic, and we'll keep going. Thanks so much.